Ladies and gentlemen, I decided to get an expert on the Muslim faith, Islamic literature, Shady Nasser. Dr. Nasser joins me today. I ask him the question, is the Quran a miracle? Many Muslims have joined onto my channel. I've openly had a platform where they could discuss. That doesn't mean I'll always keep it open. But they've come on and they said, well, people memorize the whole book as if that's somehow a miracle. I mean, compare that to someone walking on water, right? Or someone raising the dead, right? That sounds like more of a miracle than people just memorizing. Are there natural explanations that better fit the data that Muslims aren't paying attention to? Are there traditions outweighing the rational position of being a skeptic on their own stance? I think so. But let's ask an expert today, see what he has to say about this topic. Ladies and gentlemen, join MythVision's Patreon not only to support us, but there are 72 videos that I did with Dr. Dennis R. McDonald and Richard Carrier, all on the Patreon, early access. You guys can ask personal questions when I go to interview these scholars, and you're helping MythVision grow.
So thank you for the introduction, and I will try my best to answer questions you have to the best of my ability, as I said. So you want me to tell you if the Quran is a miracle or not? This is the first question.
Yes, and I know sometimes it's going to be your opinion on certain things.
Sure.
I want to try and take a scientific method, a historical approach, and be critical of what we actually find in the data. How one interprets that is up to them, but it seems to me when someone claims this book was literally a miracle, it's perfect as it is, they kind of downplay variant readings. They don't really see how that might play a significant role. I look at biblical studies and I could see, okay, we don't have the original. We definitely don't have that. There's so many different variants and manuscripts, etc., in the tradition. Is Islam or is Muslim faith and the Quran sharing the same kind of motif in a way?
Right. Okay. So there are many questions to answer here. So let us start with, first the miracle issue. When we are studying scripture, right, in an academic setting, I think most academics, we are not really concerned with trying to research such questions. Is the Quran a miracle or not? At the end of the day, it's a subjective opinion, for people to find, this book or, the Quran as a miracle. Other people don't think it's a miracle. It's as simple as that. So there are many academics who are not Muslims who approach studying the Quran as a great book, for Islamic civilization. And they study it, even though that they are not Muslims, they have great respect for the book. There are other academics, who don't hold the Quran to such standards. And they think that, it is written by, a person in the 7th century. It's full of mistakes, contradictions. And they also base their research starting from that, if you want, viewpoint. There are also Muslims, who research the text, starting from the perspective that it is a miracle. There are other Muslims who are allegedly objective, and they also try to approach the text as just a literary text, how it was transmitted, what it says, regardless whether it's a miracle or not. So I don't think in academia we are concerned with proving or disproving that the Quran is a miracle. Okay, that's not, I don't recall reading an academic article that tries to prove that or disprove it, right? So what it means to, for at least for Muslims, that the Quran is a miracle, that, they think that the Quran holds, first, there are several, if you want, several layers of that. First, that language. Okay, so it's written in a literary language that is very eloquent. It was revealed to the Prophet. He challenged, the Arabs back then to compose something similar, in eloquence. According to the tradition, they failed. They couldn't. Thus, the Islamic tradition says that this is why the Quran is a miracle, because no one was able to imitate its style. Okay. Now, whether this is true or not, that's open to discussion. We do have many attempts for people back in the days and even recently that they try to emulate the style of the Quran. Now, whether they are successful or not, that's a subjective issue, right? So you can read something and then you would like it. You would say, oh, well, I like this piece of literature. I think this is better than, this chapter or that chapter of the Quran as a reader, right? As a reader. But of course, if you are, holding this text as the perfect example of eloquence, you are going to downplay any attempt, right, to emulate it. So at the end of the day, it's very difficult to be subjective in matters of literary taste to say that, oh, this text is more eloquent than this because I feel it.
So
right?
that begs the question to say, from a scholarly point of view, I'll ask to put the scholarly glasses on because that's what you are. How did the Quran come to us? Based on the evidence we have, and not just what the tradition wants to necessarily say, how did the Quran come to us? Because from what I understand, there are multiple, even within the tradition. This is the problem. This is the problem I see. Even within the tradition, you have Abu Bakr, and then you have other traditions within the Islamic faith that are saying, no, this is what happened. He went around and he collected the memory of the recitation of the Quran from warriors that were dying, and they didn't want them all to die off. So we're collecting all this. And then there's another tradition, and I'm probably missing some things because I'm not.
I will reiterate. Yeah.
And then this other guy, and he's trying to do this and that, and like they're all trying to explain how we got the Quran in tradition. And I want to try and give tradition its opportunity, but I also want to look at it empirically from the scholarly point of view on what scholars have concluded, saying this is how we actually think we come to the conclusion. And maybe we'll never know exactly how, but that's okay. I like to investigate.
Sure. Okay, so first point, let's talk about memory and memorization. I think one of the problems, especially Western scholars, when they study Islam, regardless of their background, there are certain cultural elements that they are not aware of, and then they learn it, they study Arabic, they study Islam, and then, they learn it. Okay, well, memorizing text is, important in their tradition, but to what extent, If you grow up in, a Middle Eastern / Eastern, not just Middle Eastern. I mean, there are even Eastern cultures, the Chinese, the Japanese, they also cherish memorization, The certain element of memorization, at least in the Western environment, it's not as important, or as evident as it is in the Middle East. So when, you hear, a story about, people memorizing, the text of the Quran, or memorizing, hadith, we can talk about this later, or poetry. It's like, oh, how is it possible that, all people can memorize all this amount of information accurately? So that's now the issue here, accurately. So our problem or our issue here is the accurate part. It's not the memorization part. So we already know that this tradition or this culture, they're individuals, they do memorize texts, a lot of texts. We are talking about thousands of poems. We are talking about, 6,200, 300 verses of the Quran. And it is evident today. You have, young children who can, by the age of 5 or 6, they can memorize the whole text of the Quran. And we're not talking about 1 or 2 individuals. It's just a normal practice, right? In this kind of culture.
They said that was a miracle too, by the way.
Well,
of course, that's subjective,
it's not. Well, again, it is subjective, but you can teach the kid anything, right? So you can teach them the Quran, you can teach them the Bible to memorize it. You can teach them music. There are children who are 5 or 6 years old who memorize scores of symphonies and sonatas, right? So you can teach a kid anything. So the miracle is if you have a 60-year-old or 70-year-old who tries to memorize a text, will he or she be able to memorize the text as perfectly or as good as a 5-year-old kid? So that's the issue. So the point here is that it is a culture that relies on memorization of texts more than writing. So we'll get now to writing. When we tackle the issue of memorization in research, we don't question the fact that Arabs or Muslims do memorize the texts. We question the accuracy, like to what extent. Is it really, that the 70 people who were killed at the battle that you were mentioning, right? Abu Bakr, when he wanted to collect the Quran, why the first account of the collection? So why did people, according to the tradition, Muslims or the companions of the Prophet, they memorized the Quran, okay, most of it. And then there was the apostasy wars, okay, during Abu Bakr's time, when after Muhammad died, there are tribes in the south, who reverted. Okay, so he went and he fought them in the south. According to the account, 70 of these people, of these memorizers of the Quran, they died. And then the account says, well, because they were afraid that those people who memorized the Quran are dying, and then the Quran would be lost. So he, suggested, let us collect it so that it's not going to be lost. Okay. Now there are issues with this, with this tradition. One of the questions that researchers ask is that what do we know about these 70 people who died in the battle? We don't have their names, okay? And other researchers suggested that probably those 70 readers. Why would you send 70 reciters of the Quran to fight in a battle? Okay.
Good question.
Questions
like
asked.
A motif too, if I might add. Sometimes
Sure.
I might throw some things in here to
please do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The academic arena, if you will, recognizes, for example, there is this narrative, a supposed historical narrative of how the Septuagint came to be. There were 70 scribes who supposedly went and translated the Hebrew into Greek. Now, many of these scholars will say, we know that a translation took place, but 70, it's a significant number. It kind of carries some religious and spiritual, probably numerological significance. And so to buy into the tradition that this is actually historically accurate, what if it's trying to say something different is the point? Or
no, I agree with you. It's the number 7. We have, the tradition of the 7 ahruf or the 7 modes. It's also 7, 7 skies, 7 earths. I mean, there's something about number 7 in the Near East, at least. So it's not just, so I mean, whether they were 70 or, 68 or 60, I don't know. But the question is, we don't have a full list of the names of these people. Okay, and the question is, we also have other accounts in other traditions that the Prophet would send readers, the word qurra, to fight. And one a question that was raised by a couple of scholars is that why would you send Quran reciters to fight? And other these two scholars, they suggested that Yumbol back in the I think 20-25 years in an article, and recently Behnan Sadiqi also, he gave a lecture on this, and probably his article came out recently, is that the word qari or reader, it had double meaning back then. Okay, so it means a hermit / people who came from a specific region in Iraq, and they were called qurra, and there was a mix between the the two terms. That's an interpretation, at least, trying to get away from the narrative that you have 70 Quran reciters who died in a battle and we don't know anything about them, right?
Got it.
So back to the question of, this is the first collection. So they were afraid that the Quran would be lost, and Abu Bakr, he suggested to collect the Quran so that it will not be lost. And then what happened is that they assigned, one of the younger companions, his name is Zayd. And then they told him, well, you are young, you're energetic, why don't you start collecting the Quran? And then he said, how could I do something that the Prophet didn't do? Okay. So that's another, question. So why the narrative says is that how could we do something that the Prophet didn't do? Meaning that if the Prophet didn't collect the Quran, why should we collect it?
Ladies and gentlemen, join MythVision's Patreon not only to support us, but there are 72 videos that I did with Dr. Dennis R. McDonald and Richard Carrier, all on the Patreon, early access. You guys can ask personal questions when I go to interview these scholars, and you're helping MythVision grow.